Welcome back. So just to remind you, I'm talking to Andy Amery, ex Metropolitan Police Major Events Planner, and more recently security advisor on a large number of international sporting events. In part one, we talked about the bidding process, the lead up to the London 2012 Olympic Games, which Andy was involved heavily in from the beginning, and then some of the challenges of setting up an organising committee for an Olympic Games. In this session, we're going to talk a bit more about London 2012, but then also a bit about kind of actually supporting events today and how the environment and the risk appetite have changed over the years. So thank you. Welcome back, Andy. I suppose it would be good to think a bit more about 2012 and some of those challenges of organising, a games that was taking place over, often we build a big, cities build a big stadium, they put everything on in a big stadium, they might have a couple of other venues, but we did it differently, didn't we? We decided to turn London into the whole of London was hosting the event. How did that cause some security challenges, Andy?
Yeah, of course it did. And I go further and say, actually, we're trying to engage the whole country. If you look at the backdrop, we've seen Athens, and which had the games in 2004, a lot of wastage in a country that could ill afford it at the time. And I was out there on a private holiday in 2006, and you could see all the dereliction already that had happened with some of their venues. Beijing, different yet again, very difficult for a London team to learn from the Beijing Games because the legal structures and, dare I say, the relationships are such that it puts some challenges in the way. So London was very much about how do we get the best out of the money for this in terms of using temporary venues or venues with a clear legacy going forward. And if anyone gets the chance, go and have a walk around the Olympic Park in London now. It's just a fantastic afternoon out. It really, really does bring home how you can get these things right. So that was on the sort of corporate piece, but from a security perspective, as we said in the last episode, we won the bid on the 6th of July. On the morning of the 7th of July, we saw the terrible attacks in London, and that changed the focus onto security for the games going forward. So it was very much about integration, not isolation. The days of the security team being locked in a little room in the corner for which only 3 people knew the number, gone. We were right in the middle of it. Manage things like security clearance and confidential documents and all this stuff that people can put in the way. Get rid of it and work and make sure that everybody can be immersed in the security planning. Bring in the catering department, the transport department, everybody else, sell the security story and work with them to ensure that their elements of the games are secure. So many of your viewers will be well aware of the sort of security by design processes and systems, making sure that from the design stage, we designed the security measures in really helped reinforce not only to UK but also to our global partners that we were really taking security seriously, because of that 7th of July thing sitting in the background. The global view was London Games are a high security risk, and yet we managed to deliver fantastic games where security was both effective but actually very discreet in its delivery.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah, it really was. And I particularly when I think about the volunteers and how we kind of integrated private security, policing, in the end, the army. I don't think we've planned to talk about that. That might be for an entire different time. But and the volunteers, it really felt like everyone was coming together to deliver a safe and secure games, didn't it? Which was just fantastic. And 2012, we're over a decade ago now, but you're still involved in policing, in securing major sporting events. How has it changed? Well, what does it differ? How different does it feel today to how it did back then?
I think that some of the challenges are still the same about international relations, and different nations have different issues. Obviously, the approach to law enforcement in places like China and Russia is very different to what it is in Europe. Rio had some difficulties as well. But I think if we try and focus on the UK, the biggest change really is the threat picture. So we're very much now facing the ever increasing cyber risks, and we see the challenges in the UK on a daily basis. They also apply to events. London didn't. London 2012 still had a couple of major cyber attacks. One indeed on the opening ceremony day, but now they're so much more prevalent. And certainly, cyber was a major issue for the likes of the Birmingham Commonwealth Games. The other one, of course, is drones, an ever-increasing a threat that's difficult to manage as the payload and the battery power of these things increases. And when I say drones, I also mean the potential to attack a drone display. So the link between drone and cyber, if you like. They're sort of some of the newer type of threats, which just reinforce the importance of risk assessment. But ultimately, I think the basic thing is the same. You're going to need a secure perimeter fence. You're going to need a degree of search and screening capability. But in the event sector, at least, the airport-style search arch and X-ray machine is slowly moving to a more enhanced free-flow capability that a couple of companies are starting to develop. And that has implications elsewhere because it increases the flow, which in one way is good, but whoever's going to meet this flow of people down the line, has got to get people into seating, vomitories or wherever quicker. So it comes back to that whole journey, if you like, of security, a day in the life for every participant in these events.
Yeah, and looking at it holistically. Yeah. And you must have worked with, obviously you came from the Met, but you must have worked with a vast number of police forces, both in the UK and internationally now. What are there so many common tropes that you see when forces come into policing a major event like an Olympics for the first time? Kind of, do they approach it similarly or differently?
It's a good question. I think most forces now have had some involvement in various major events over the years. If I go all the way back to the Queen's Golden Jubilee tour back in 2002, we went around every police force area, and that had its challenges. And then obviously for London, the tour relay hit every police force in the country.
I remember that.
Another, these things suddenly would appear that during the bid stage, talk relay, what's that? And yet obviously the security resources for that were massive. So I think many forces, all forces, have a degree of responsibility and understanding of how these things work now. And there is a sort of definitely a desire and a quest by forces to try and get these things right, which is great. The risk is they sometimes have a tendency to overplay it. And sometimes the focus of risk gets muddled with the desire to want to ensure that absolutely nothing could possibly go wrong, which can in turn increase cost. There are some experiences of some forces seeing the financial opportunities potentially of additional equipment and what have you, perfectly legitimate and natural. But I think
night vision goggles.
The greatest danger.
Everyone wants night vision goggles.
Vision goggles. But ultimately, I think it's about ensuring that everybody works together and doesn't overcomplicate things. That brings it back to the point earlier about ensuring you've got the right people doing these things. And operational independence of chief constables is the basis upon which policing is built. It allows police forces to deliver their services at a local level. But when you start dealing with these big events, and from an athlete's perspective, they would like to go through the same security regime, irrespective of what police force area they're in. They're not aware of the complications and the politics behind that. And I think Chris Allison summed it up well and got it bang on. And this is about locally delivered events, but nationally coordinated, and using the skills and the ability of those that have been there before, and for government and policies to be set around what the look and feel or the security level should be is definitely the way forward.
And we've talked about kind of policing and police forces and their involvement, which is obviously key in so effectively delivering security at major sporting events. But obviously, we also know that it's not just about police forces. There's a kind of private security and non-policing security have a big role to play. What do you think is key in that getting that successful collaboration right between an organising committee, police forces, and private security?
It's really hard. It's about understanding that none of us are perfect. We all have our skill sets, and we all have our areas where we're a little bit deficient, and that's life. Doesn't matter who you could be, the most senior police officer in the world. We'd still have some areas we're not great at. And as soon as people can not expose, but share their weaknesses in a professional environment, you can ensure that the overall team, if you like, whether it be the emergency services at one, the law enforcement world at one, or the private security industry, can work together to ensure that those shortfalls are built up in other areas. And the way you achieve that is through testing and exercising. And testing and exercising again. Start with, sitting in the coffee shop, going through the ifs and the whats and the maybes and the whys, and then take it to a tabletop type scenario, and then to a full-blown exercise. And don't be frightened to get it wrong, because that's what those exercises are for. And as I said, we're not all perfect, and we're going to make mistakes. And where you learn the strengths of your partners and fellow agencies is in when they make a mistake, how do they pick themselves back up? And how do they ensure that they then work with everybody else to deliver a high quality solution to whatever the problem was? Now, and there are thousands of examples of that from London and from Birmingham 2022 and from other major events that the UK's been involved in.
About coming together, isn't it, and doing everything in a collaborative and joint and transparent and open way, and trying to remove some of the hierarchy, I suppose, as well.
I think so. It's more than just the partnership approach, which is constantly wheeled out at every press conference. It's better than that. It's more intense than that. It's about relationships and people. And yes, working as a partnership, but a tested partnership. A partnership or a group of people that have put themselves under pressure during the planning stage, that know each other so closely in the professional environment, and have the ability and the trust just to pick the phone up. That no one's in charge. That as I said earlier, everybody's ego is left at the door, and we're there to do a job. And no individual can do that on their own. You need to work together. And I think that the Olympic and Paralympic Games and the Commonwealth Games are probably the greatest examples of where you can get that right.
Yeah, they really are. Andy, that is a beautiful note for us to finish our conversation on, I think. It has been so interesting. It's been, for me personally, it's been absolute joy to see you and to be reminded of some of our shared times together. But I really hope that it's also been interesting for the people who will be watching us too out there about some of just the stuff that goes on behind the scenes at that beautiful opening ceremony and beyond. So thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all the very best.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to catch up, and I wish you well.